Sport Adventures. Today I'm going to be installing a 42 tooth rear sprocket on my CRF 250L. Factory is a 40 tooth rear sprocket, and I want to give it a little more torque, so I'm going to put on a 42 tooth Sunstar sprocket. It's a Sunstar steel sprocket, inexpensive really. I don't usually buy aluminum sprockets. I did when I race motocross, but for these bikes I just buy steel because I believe they last longer, more durable than the aluminum. So this is a 42 tooth. Gaining 2 teeth will give it some more low end, especially with the bigger rear tire that I have on this bike. The Sunstar part number is 2-356542, and these are super good sprockets. I've used them for years and years and years on my Woods bikes. I've used them on my four-wheelers, all my ATVs. I've used them on everything. It's pretty much the only sprocket I've ever bought, other than a couple aluminum ones, is Sunstar. That's just the brand I've always stuck with. Always liked them. Had real good service out of them, and they're just good quality sprockets at not even a crazy price. It's pretty reasonable. So we're going to install this sprocket, and hopefully I won't have to do much. I don't have to lengthen the chain because I'm only raising 2 teeth, so I should have enough chain to still do it without lengthening the chain. One good thing is, too, I wanted to tell you, you don't have to change the front sprocket, drop it from a 14 to a 13. A lot of people do. I have on this, but I put the 14 back. The problem with this smaller diameter front sprocket is the smaller diameter front sprocket causes the chain to ride lower on your chain buffer. I'll show you on the swing arm over there, and causes premature wear on the chain buffers that run along the swing arm. So I never recommend dropping that front sprocket. Raising it, okay, but not dropping it. Always, in my opinion, always raise the rear if you want to gear it down. So let's get started with this. I'll turn the bike around here where we can get a good angle, and we'll get started installing the sprocket. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is loosen the rear axle nut. To do that, the tool you'll need for that is a 24mm socket and ratchet. Works great. And then for the other side, just take a 19mm boxed in wrench, and you can put that on the other side. And then take this to loosen. Take this. I had that pretty tight. Go ahead and spin that nut off of there. Take out this spacer here. It's also got the mark on it. Remember where this mark is? If you can see this, remember where this mark is? That's what you line your chain back up with. Keep your wheel straight. And tighten your chain, you'll keep your wheel straight and line it up with it. Okay, lay that over here. Also, one thing I want to do before I remove the wheel is I'll take these nuts here loose. Makes it a whole lot easier than after you get the wheel off trying to wrestle it around. For that, you will need a 17mm wrench and a 6mm Allen wrench. Stick your Allen wrench in there. That way you can break them loose a whole lot easier with it inside here. Now don't turn the Allen wrench. Just use the Allen wrench to hold it while you turn the hex nut. Okay, look at it loose. Go ahead and break all these. All broke loose, spin them all off. One thing I recommend too, I see people do it, try not to lay I just stick the nut and the bolt back together. Don't lay the bolts in the dirt because you don't want to get a little dirt gravel on the bottom. You know, keep them clean. You can take the wheel off and take these off after you break them loose, but you want to break them loose on here. It's a big help to do that, but I'll leave one of them on just so the sprocket don't fall off. So I'll leave one of them on until I take the wheel plumb off on the floor. I don't put Loctite on them because these are lock nuts and they hold plenty good just to get them tight. They hold plenty good without it. And as you can tell by looking at it, there is no Loctite from the factory, so that one I just leave finger tight just to keep the sprocket from falling off. Okay, then what I'll do, let me turn the bike around here on the stand where you can see it a little better maybe. Okay, then what you want to do on both sides is break this. There's a lock nut for your chain adjustment bolt. Spin it loose and crank this forward a little bit just so you have some slack in your chain. A little more slack makes it easier to come off. Just a little bit. Same way on the other side. Loosen that one. Okay. Now we can pull the axle out. Hold on to the axle too because it has grease on the axle and you don't want that greasy axle falling down in the dirt and all the dirt sticking to it. Pull the axle off, lay it on something where you're not going to drop it. Take the wheel and slide it forward, then you can pull the chain off. And what I do with the chain, I pull it over to the side here. Like that. You don't want to let these drop on the floor either like I just did, but I'll have to wipe it off. I need to clean it anyway. I always want to clean the dirt off of these because they get so grimy. So I clean them all off. Make sure that there's grease in this seal right here before you put it back together, and make sure there's grease on your axle before you slide it back in. Take both of these off. Okay. Okay, now we'll just take my one that I left on there. Take it off. Remove the loose sprocket from the package. They even send you a couple stickers. If you're into stickers, they send a couple Sunstar stickers with it. If you look at this sprocket compared to the stock one, they pretty much look exactly the same, except for this one's 2 teeth more. So, put that in there. We'll line that one up there. Start putting our bolts back in. Remember when you put these bolts back in, right here, that the bolt goes through the washer and the nut goes on the other side, on the bottom side. Don't put the washers on the top. Get them all on here. This should help me with some low end torque I changed that tire to a bigger tire. It needs a little more low end. This tire I have on here is a 130/80/18. So it's a big tire. You can see when you also put your new sprocket on, you want to put it with the name Sunstar where it says right there out. And because these holes for this sprocket are recessed for these bolts right here to set down in, just like your factory one is. See how they're recessed? You want to make sure you put it back on the same way, not upside down. Okay, now what I want to do is stick the wheel back on, and then I want to tighten these bolts after I get the wheel put back on. Same way I'd loosen them, tighten them when I get it back on. Okay, one thing I want to do is I always take the grease off this axle bolt. Clean all the grease off of it and the grime off of it and the grit. Clean that off. Lay it down here. Same thing with these spacers. These spacers, you really can't get them mixed up. They're both exactly the same thing. One on each side of the wheel. They go right down inside that seal like that. But I clean them off. Clean all the grit because usually they're really dirty. Then I take and wipe the seal off. Be careful when you wipe the seal off on the wheel not to let any dirt or debris fall down inside the seal or the bearing. Do the same thing on the other side. Then, while I got my rag here, I go ahead and clean out this hole where the axle goes through. Because it's usually pretty grimy too. A bunch of old sandy stuff in there. Don't matter how much you clean your bike. You just want to do it right when you do it. Keep that clean. Same way on the other side. I'll do the other side. Like that. Now, we're ready for it to go back together. Okay, now I'm going to take the axle. I got just some general purpose grease. It's waterproof grease. And I'll just lightly coat the axle from one end to the other. No, you don't have to smear a big bunch on there. Just lightly coat the axle all the way down from one end to the other. Flip it over. Make sure you get both ends. Same thing on these. I don't want to put much on there, not on the whole thing, just on the end that goes into the seal. Just on that end, lightly coat both of those. You don't want to stick this dry steel into the seal like that. You want it to be lightly greased so when you put it back it don't damage the seal. There's a seal to keep the water and dirt and debris out on each side of this wheel. One on this side, spin it around on the disc brake side. There's one over here. Wipe it off same way I did the other one. Make sure I don't get no dirt and debris falling down inside of the seal. Okay, before we go putting this all back together and having a lot of fighting to do, one of the first things I do is I take my chain and I put it over the edge of the swing arm like this, just so it will stay over there, not fall off when you're trying to put the wheel up there, because you're going to have to hold the wheel and these spacers in the seals and all this stuff together. The brake caliper, if you look at the brake caliper, it's a good time to check your brake pads, which mine are still fairly good, and that's 11,000 miles on these brake pads, and they're still really pretty good. So this dog right here is what this notch right here sets in, and then it slides forward. Make sure you don't get it too high or too low. That slides right forward, and your hole right here will line up for your axle to go through. You can see my finger going through the end there. You want to keep that on. And then one thing to do too is, before you get up there, is spread your brake pads apart. You shouldn't have to compress the caliper or anything. I just spread them apart so it's wide gapped, and the disc will slide right up into that groove when you put this on. It's going to be really hard for me to video and show you as I put all this together and hold everything at the same time. I'll just do my best. And hopefully I don't have too much problem with it, because it can be a problem. Sometimes these little pads will come unclipped out of there. You have to put them back up in place, or you drop one of the little clips out. The anti-rattle shims right here might fall out. So just remember how this all goes back together before you do. If one of them comes out, you'll know how to put that back. So, okay. Let me grab my wheel. When you put this axle back in, be sure that you put the one notch up. There's several notches on this one. Put that down. The one notch for the mark goes up, same way on the other side. Okay, what you want to do is make sure you get your spacers in here, that you've already greased them up and got them clean. Don't drop them on the floor. Both spacers into the wheel. Roll it around here carefully without the spacers falling out and without knocking your brake caliper off. There you go. The way I do it is keep the brake caliper on. So go ahead and start the axle in, but don't start the axle through all the way. They just set it through the swing arm into the brake caliper mount. And what you want to do is when you go up, is you're going to try to line up the disc brake into the brake pads. And at the same time, you have to be watching the other side and not knock your spacer out and hitting the swing arm with it. That seems like always a trick too. Keep those brake pads spaced apart before you go up with your wheel. I usually use my knee to help me. I'll set it on my knee. Helps me kind of hold it. Okay, so I've got my axle in here, got it up in there now. Make sure all my spacers are in the right place. My single notch is up on my alignment. Like that. Okay. Back over here, make sure the single notch is up on this one. I can tell that I have gained a little with that new sprocket bigger, so I'll have to crank these in a little further. Put the nut on there. This is a lock nut also. You don't have to put no Loctite on it. Okay, now what you want to do is let me zoom the camera in where I can show you a little better. Okay, this is what I was going to tell you about the notches. And I said to put the one notch on the top. You see, I put the one notch on the top. And the reason that's for, all the one notch for on the top is so you can see this bar. It's like a graph, green and red. And when you get into the end of this red or in this red, it's time to change the chain sprockets because they've stretched that much. But we are concerned when you adjust the chain about the bottom notches. You see this one dot right here and these four notches right here. Okay, when I adjust this back, I will adjust the chain with the proper slack in the chain. When you adjust these, you make sure that you got if you got your first notch here, this distance from that, or your first notch is on this dot, you got to have it exactly the same way on the other side for your wheel to be straight and true. And what you got to determine is your chain free play. You want about 1.25 inches of free play from bottom to out notch. You don't have to stretch it hard as you can, but pull it down to the stops, up till it stops, and you should have 1.25 inches of free play right here. And then make sure your notch back here is lined up. Whichever one this notch here, this notch sitting by this dot, you go on the other side and make it exactly the same way with 1.25 inches free play on the chain. Then you got it right. Then you can crank in your lock nuts here. Make sure these keep snug against this spacer, the small 10mm. Take the 12mm, tighten these up, and you can tighten your nut on your axle, your 24mm ratchet socket right here. Tighten that up, and you're good to go, and your sprocket's installed. And that's pretty much all there is to installing a sprocket. It's not a easy job necessarily. I mean, if you do it, but if you do it at home, you'd be proud you've done it and got it done successfully and done a good job, and you've learned a lot, and you'll be able to do it down the road and save you several dollars, because the shop would charge you quite a bit just to change the sprocket. Way more expensive than just the price of the sprocket. But I'm going to show you another thing up here in just a minute. Let me go ahead and snug up all my sprocket bolts. Like I said, I've got this back on now so I can get to the wrench and the Allen wrench. 6mm, 17mm socket or wrench back here. Tighten these back up, and you want to tighten them good and firm, good and tight. That's one thing you don't want to forget. Don't want to run with them loose. Get all them tightened back up. Tighten your axle nut. Make sure you got your lock nut tied here for your adjustment bolt, and the 10mm is snug up against this aluminum spacer. And your notches are lined on both sides. 1 1/4 inch free play from top to bottom on the chain, and you are good to go. Okay, there's one thing I want to show you. Some of you with a sharp eye may have been paying attention and caught it, but I had when I was showing you earlier about the adjusting the chain tension, well, I had the axle in the other direction, which that axle will work either way. It really doesn't matter, but I just want it back the way it come from factory, so nothing to it. I just held the wheel, pulled the axle out, slid it back in the other way, tightened it down to 65 foot-pounds of torque, and good to go. So, okay, here we are. What I've done is I took the front sprocket cover off for the front sprocket. You can see the front sprocket chain going around the sprocket here. This is the stock sprocket, 14-tooth front sprocket. This is the chain buffer here for the swing arm. It's rubber. It goes around down here. You can see under the swing arm, also on top of the swing arm. And what happens is, I've had this happen, so I know by experience, is what happens is when you drop this sprocket diameter by changing it to a 13, or especially a 12, there's no way I do that. But even dropping it to 13, if you can see in here, you can see how close the chain is sitting on that buffer. Okay, it's sitting on it. And see the way the chain comes out here? Straight across. It's holding it up on this sprocket. When you lower this, you decrease this diameter, make this thing smaller, put a 13-tooth on, you lower this chain, and it puts more force on that buffer right there. And it will wear. I have seen them when I've mechanicked for 20 years on these things, and I have seen them come in with this chain rubbed plumb through that buffer and digging a ditch into the swing arm. So I don't recommend, you do what you want, everybody has their opinions, I don't recommend changing that front sprocket. Leave it stock, spend a little bit more money, change the rear sprocket, and you'll have a lot better service, a lot longer life of your bike and your chain buffer. You won't have to worry about that. So that was just a little tech tip extra that I threw in there. Some people may disagree, but I've worked on bikes all my life. I mechanicked actually for 20 years at a shop, and I've run into it numerous times. So that's just a good tip to tell you guys. Well, thank you all for watching Woodzman Dual Sport Adventures. Today was our sprocket install. If you watched the video, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to the channel. Click the thumbs up if you like the video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask, because I have no problem answering your questions. anything about motorcycles pretty much. So if you have a question, just please ask. And I also wanted to remind you about my grunge brush giveaway. Check back in a later video, that I had already done. If you look back, there's a giveaway. My monthly giveaway is a grunge brush. Now, to enter the contest, you do need to be a subscriber to my channel. You do need to click the thumbs up, and you need to post a comment saying you won in the contest. Also, please share the link to my video. Thank you all for watching all my videos, and I'll catch you in the next one.